Great. Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon, including members of the public who are watching the live webcast. My name is Marilee Selesky, and I am the chair of the Design Review Committee. Welcome to this virtual committee meeting being held on September 9th, 2021. Well, I'll do the full thing. The Design Review Committee is a volunteer committee made up of local residents, including several members with professional expertise in architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, and structural engineering. The purpose of the Design Review Committee is to aid in the evaluation of site plan approval applications and wind impact assessments for development within the Downtown Halifax Plan, governed by the Downtown Halifax Land Use Bylaw. The Design Review Committee assesses applications for conformity with the Downtown Halifax Design Manual and advises municipal staff accordingly. So we'll start with the roll call going through the list. Christina. Oh, I think Christina's just coming on now.
Hi.
Hi. Charlotte.
Hello.
We received regrets from Erica. Jan, are you able? Was tentative? No, no Jan. Jessica.
Hi.
There's Jessica. Julian.
Hi.
Julian. Marcel.
Hello.
And Nathan.
Hello.
Rob.
Here.
We received regrets from Sandrine and Sarah.
Hello.
And then for our staff members that are present, Carl Purvis.
Hello, everyone.
Aaron McIntyre.
Aaron won't be joining us today.
No?
No.
Okay. Maggie Holm.
I think it just might be Paul Sampson and I.
Okay. I'm just going down my list.
Sure, no problem.
Paul Sampson.
Hi, here.
Hi, Paul. Sarah Knight.
Yes, I'm here.
And Annie Sherry. We have.
Hi.
Andrea Lavasi Wood.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm not sure. Oh, yep. Alicia Wall as well.
Present, Madam Chair.
Okay, so you should, for the committee members, you should have received a copy of the minutes from the August 12th, 2021 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting? I'll ask you to identify yourself by name.
Rob LeBlanc, so moved.
Great. And a seconder, please.
Charlotte Fouquet seconded.
Thank you. Are there any errors or omissions from those minutes that need to be noted? Anybody? Okay. So I'll call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. If you're contrary, say nay, that the minutes from the August 12th, 2021 meeting be approved.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And the motion is carried. Thank you. So moving on to the approval of the order of business. Are there any additions or modifications to the agenda?
Thank you, Chair. The clerk's office did not receive any requests for additions or modifications to today's agenda.
Great, thank you. And to the members of the committee, are there any modifications or additions that you'd like to request? No, we're good. Okay, so then can I please have a motion to approve the agenda as distributed?
I'll approve. Jess Harper.
Just a motion and seconder. Sorry, there was someone speaking.
I'll second it, Marcel.
Marcel, thank you. So yeah, motion by Jess, second by Marcel, and we'll call for the question to approve the agenda as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Anybody contrary say nay.
Aye.
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 And the agenda is approved. Great. Business arising out of the minutes, there was none. There are none noted. We'll call for a declaration of conflict of interest for the any of the agenda items for today's meeting.
Merrily, I do have to call for declaration of conflict of interest. The applicant for case 23726 is WSP, and I work at WSP.
Okay, that's a good one. So when we move into that section of the meeting, we'll have to get you to turn off your camera and mute yourself.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Deferred business, we have none that I'm aware of. Was there any correspondence or petitions received that need to be reviewed today?
Thank you, Chair. The clerk's office didn't receive any correspondence for today's meeting, nor did we receive notification of any petitions.
Perfect. Okay. In terms of information items brought forward, there were also none. So that moves us into reports and discussion. So I'll ask Carl if you could provide an overview of any upcoming applications that the committee should be aware of.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this point, there are no new applications subsequent to the one that I mentioned last month that have been deemed complete. And so that would be the only one that we would be expecting coming to the committee soon, which was on Barrington Street, just across from Peace and Friendship Park, just at the very south end.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move into case 23726, substantive site plan approval for 1470 Queen Street. I'll ask Paul Sampson to take the chair and start your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, great. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay, can everyone see this okay?
Yep.
Great. My name is Paul Sampson. I'm a planner with the Urban Applications Group. So case 23726 before you is an application for substantive site plan approval for a site at 1470 Queen Street in Halifax.
Sorry, Paul, this is the clerk speaking here, and we have your presentation in presenter mode. So I think I will actually stop your screen share and ask for our staff to share the presentation on your behalf, just so that it translates over to the live stream a bit more effectively, if that's all right.
Okay, sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Just give us 1 sec here. And you're good to go.
Okay, so am I running these, or are you going to be running the presentation?
And you can just say next when you're ready for us to go to the next slide
Okay.
there, and staff will do that on your behalf. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Okay, we can switch to the next slide. So the application today is made by WSP on behalf of the property owner, Mills Company Holdings Limited. And the architect for the project is DSRA. The application, the site is at 1470 Queen Street, and the proposal is an 8-story mixed-use development facing Queen Street, Spring Garden Road, and Birmingham Street. Next slide. Thank you. So the application, as mentioned, is this is an aerial view of the site. The existing buildings shown there are no longer in place. The site has been excavated, and the construction has started on the underground levels. Next slide, please. And this is just another aerial image of the site from the south. So that the building in the foreground is the Marianne building facing Clyde Street. To the right of the image is the Central Library, and just to the north of that is the Doyle building, just to give you some context on Spring Garden Road. Next slide, please. Okay, so the site is zoned DH1. It's within the Spring Garden Road precinct number 3. The height, the pre-bonus height is 22 meters, and the post-bonus is 28 meters. In this case, there is a post-bonus component that is proposed, and there will be a public benefit required. The site is also under view planes 9 and 10. And on the roof level, there will be elements that are impacted by view planes. In this particular case, there are existing view plane protrusions that predated the view plane regulations. So in this case, the proposal will take advantage of that by kind of being within the shadow of those existing protrusions of existing buildings on the peninsula. The street wall setback is between 0 and 1.5 meters. That is met. The street wall height, the minimum is 11 meters and the maximum height is 17 meters. And Spring Garden Road is a pedestrian-oriented commercial street. Next slide, please. So this is an image of the proposal. It's an 8-story mixed-use development. Proposed ground floor retail and restaurant uses, approximately 216 residential units, mostly apartment type. There are also some townhouse style units. There is underground parking, 2 levels of underground parking. The vehicular entrances are off Queen Street, and off of Birmingham Street, there is loading entrances. One of the highlights of the proposal is also a through block pedestrian promenade with retail and patio spaces, restaurant spaces. Next slide, please. So this is a view from the Birmingham and Spring Garden corner. So you have an idea there of both the Spring Garden elevation and the Birmingham Street elevation. And if you move to the next slide, it shows a little bit better angle of the Birmingham Street, which in the middle there's the proposed pedestrian promenade. Next slide, please. So in terms of the design manual, one of the items we highlighted in the discussion section of the staff report deals with canopies and awnings. And the purpose for highlighting this is there are several ways to deal with weather protection and visual and pedestrian interest along street frontages. So a couple of those are providing canopies and awnings for those weather protection, and also to animate the street and provide some visual interest. Another way is to provide weather protection through building overhangs. There are, on Spring Garden Road, there are actually some good examples close by. And they just happen to be Westwood Development's buildings. So on Birmingham, there's a couple of examples, the BMO building and the TD Canada Trust building. Each of those buildings have new canopies along the sidewalk. And the other example is the Doyle project on the other end, the other corner of the site on Queen and Spring Garden, which utilizes overhangs, building overhangs instead of canopies. So the discussion section of the report kind of highlights that as just a topic of discussion and for something for the committee to think about. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of requested variances, there are kind of 5 categories of variances. The first one is the minimum street wall width along Birmingham Street. So this variance was basically requested to allow for the pedestrian promenade, and so there is a gap in the street wall to allow for that. It's a minor reduction, 3%, and it's because it's for the pedestrian promenade. Staff recommend that approval of this variance. And we can switch to the next slide, please. Variance number 2, the upper story side yard setback. This is the setback of the building from more or less the rear property line, which abuts the Marianne building. The reduction, the requirement is 5.5 meters setback from the mid-rise portion of the building. In this case, the setbacks will be between 1 meter, 1.09 meters and 4.2 meters. Again, this setback is requested to allow the room for the pedestrian promenade. The applicant's submission talks about 2 options. They had 2 options that they were considering, and they chose this option, which was to kind of push the building further south towards the existing property line to allow for the promenade. And that submission explains a little bit in a little bit of detail why they chose this option. So staff recommend approval of this one as well. Allows for the promenade. It also allows for a double loaded corridor so that there's units on both sides of the corridor on that southern end of the building. The applicant has done some things here to minimize impacts on the adjacent property, and they've had discussions with the adjacent property owner. Next slide, please. Okay, variance number 3, maximum street wall height variance. This slide kind of shows the highest points along the Queen Street and the Birmingham Street street wall. The street wall height is kind of an average, but this shows the highest points on either end of the building. And there's a slight increase in the street wall height that's proposed above 17 meters. And this is related to the fact that there's a 17-meter street wall height on Spring Garden. The other 2 streets have an 18.5 height, but the bylaw indicates that when there's a lower height, the abutting streets on corner lots also adhere to that lower height. So essentially, these are minor requests to increase the height slightly. Neither height is above the 18.5 meters, and it would be consistent with the surrounding buildings in the area. Next slide, please. Variance number 4, it is the minimum street wall height variance. So this is for that small portion of the building along Birmingham, which is below 11 meters. So it ranges from 4.7 to 7.5 meters, the proposal. And essentially this gives a pedestrian friendly feel to the promenade, and allows for more sunlight penetration at different times of the day, and basically gives a kind of a more human scale aspect to that promenade. And so we recommend in favor of this as well. Next slide, please. Variance number 5, upper story street wall step backs. This is just on Spring Garden Road, and it's, as you can see here, it is the upper portion of the building where there's step backs required for sunlight angle. And in this case, the variance proposed is for the balconies. The balconies would stretch 100%, so the entire street frontage instead of 50%. And the building, the balconies would exceed the 2 meter. So in this case, it's between 3.9 and 4.3 meters of balcony depth. And these, essentially, this is to allow sunlight penetration through glass balconies that otherwise wouldn't be permitted to be a solid opaque structure. So in other words, parapets are not permitted to penetrate through the sunlight angle. But in this case, staff, our development officers indicated that the glass rails would be okay because it meets the intent of the sunlight penetration on Spring Garden Road. Next slide, please. Okay, so finally, the wind study, the wind conditions. There was a study was done by RWDI, and it's a quantitative wind tunnel testing, and the results are that wind conditions will meet the standards or surpass the standards, and meet this comfort and safety criteria. And also, there will be some improvement based on the scenario, I guess, improvement over the scenario where with the existing buildings in place. So if you compare what was there to the new development, there would be a slight improvement. And in this case, the wind study is actually quite good, especially in winter as well. So it's one of the better wind conditions that I've witnessed in terms of downtown, when considering the downtown and the winter conditions that we have. In terms of the public benefit category, the applicant is proposing undergrounding of the utilities, and in particular, in this case, it's to cover an underground vault cost to accommodate the Spring Garden Road streetscaping plan. And my understanding is that's partly underway, I think now, or in terms of the underground portion of the building. But the applicant has had some discussions with our streetscaping staff, and everyone's kind of in favor of this cost being devoted to the undergrounding of utilities. I think that's about it. I mean, if the applicant has anything else to add, they can indicate, but that's the proposed public benefit category. So we recommend in favor of that as well. Next slide, please. So staff recommend approval of the qualitative elements of the proposal, approval of the requested variances, and that the committee accept the findings of the wind study, and also recommend the undergrounding of utilities as the public benefit category to our development officer. Thank you, Madam Chair. I can answer any questions you have at this point.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay.
So I'll go through the committee members in order to see if you have any questions, and then we'll go from there. So first was Christina. Any questions for you?
Hi, thank you for the presentation, very clear. I have a few questions, and it has to do with the program you mentioned is a mixed-use building. So you're saying is housing, and so what is, I know that at the ground is commercial areas. But my question is, in any other program?
So the proposal includes different types of residential. So there's townhouse style units and apartment units, and yes, there's ground floor retail, restaurant, and other commercial uses that would be permitted under the zoning, the DH1 zone.
Okay.
So essentially, any commercial, retail, restaurant, or any other type of commercial uses that are permitted under that zoning would be eligible for like leasehold space improvements, that sort of thing.
Okay. For now, my questions are there, and then I will have comments, but I think we are under the questions part, right?
Correct, yes. Okay, thank you, Christina. Next is Charlotte. Any questions for you?
No questions. Thank you for the presentation. It was very clear.
Thank you. Next is Julian. Any questions?
Yeah. When you say the undergrounding of electrical and communication distribution systems, what's the extent where this is happening, and would they not be doing that anyway to accommodate for the vault?
The question of would they be doing that anyway, that's I don't know the answer to that. I don't think it's required. This is the public benefit is only on that portion of floor space that's beyond the 22-meter mark. So there's a component, there's a calculation that's made by staff in terms of, you know, how much funds are to be contributed towards a public benefit. That specific calculation, I don't know if the applicant has done that yet, but at this point, the committee's role is to make a recommendation to the development officer on the type of a benefit. So in this case, they've proposed that it be the undergrounding of infrastructure, and like I indicated, specifically the underground vault. But ultimately, that gets decided upon by council. Because staff have to write a report to council with a public benefit agreement, and regional council decides on you know, whether or not to approve the public benefit agreement. But what the committee's role is to make a recommendation on the category, the type of benefit. Does that explain?
Yeah, well, I have a further question, and can you expand on so it says that motion that the design review committee recommend that the development officer accept the undergrounding of electrical and communication distribution systems. So if the design review committee will recommend that the development officer accepts this, I don't feel that there's enough detail, in my opinion, to go ahead and recommend to accept something when this hasn't been quantified, at least during this meeting.
So I'll give you an example. So if the committee was of the opinion that another type of category was more maybe more relevant or more appropriate, then the committee could make a recommendation on that. As part of the staff report that goes to council, that would be indicated that the committee preferred a different scenario, like a different category. And ultimately regional council decides. But it's really the category, the type of benefit. There's a number of benefits or types that are outlined in the bylaw, in the land use bylaw. So one of those, for example, is public art. So if the committee felt strongly about public art, they could make that recommendation instead. So I hope that kind of clarifies. It's really about the category, not about the actual details of how much. Does that help?
Carl, did you have anything to add? It looks like.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think Paul did a good job in describing sort of the bylaw and the committee's role in this. Just to add something in terms of the actual vault itself, my understanding is that this was something that where HRM is redoing all of the streetscaping on Spring Garden Road. This was identified as something to say as, well, we have this issue in terms of we need a space for some of our infrastructure underneath the ground. There is no room given where the pipes and the conduits and the cables are happening, and it has to happen. It has to happen somewhere else. Otherwise, we're going to be sacrificing another goal that we want to achieve in our streetscaping. So this was not something, as my understanding it is, this is not something that the applicant would be doing otherwise. At very least of this scale, it's a much larger and broader, and it's going to be servicing buildings and sort of the street at large, as opposed to something that's explicitly for the use and the betterment of this individual building. And that's sort of what it's meant to. This category is meant to deal with. And as the committee might be aware, the bonusing scheme is changing in the future. So at least in the current one, which is where we are right now, the density bonusing in terms of the value that is required in order to get the extra height, almost always, I can't think of any application where it hasn't been the case. Almost always, the value of the amenity provided is on order of magnitude, maybe twice as great as what is actually required through the bylaw. So it's not. No one's getting through by the skin of their teeth, at least through the existing calculation. It's usually well and truly above.
Julian, does that answer your questions?
It does. However, I think it's not only the public benefit, but it's also almost it's very inconvenient that nowadays most of the power lines are overhead. So I understand that if the city is going ahead with making permanent changes to specific areas of the city, everyone who would be building anything new there would have to comply with that. Otherwise, you would have overhead wires in front of new buildings, and other buildings would have underground wires. We know that when we have bad weather conditions, we have massive power outages, and most of the cases are because these are overhead wires. And yes, but that does answer my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, next on the list is Marcel. Any questions, Marcel?
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I'm curious if there's like existing permits on the site. I'm curious why we're commenting on design that's currently under construction.
Madam Chair, the construction that's taking place now is not related to the above ground portion of the structure. In other words, the committee's decision is based on could affect future development, but it's I'm not sure. Presumably the lower portion, the underground portion is underway, so I'm presuming there are permits issued. I can't actually answer that question though.
I guess as a point of order, can they receive building permits prior to the approval from council on the overall design? Usually.
Yes. So essentially, permits are issued for the underground portions of developments as a separate. So footing and foundation permits, and they've been issued on other projects in terms of the underground work. If that helps.
Okay, Marcel.
It's essentially a partial permit.
Yeah.
I know that where the footings and structural columns go impact the rest of the design greatly. So that was my curiosity there. But thank you for your answer.
Anything further, Marcel?
That's all for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Nathan, any questions from you?
No, Madam Chair, thank you very much. I really appreciate Paul's presentation. Thank you. That was really interesting.
Great, thank you.
Rob, how about you?
No questions. Thanks, Paul, for the presentation, but definitely in favor of the undergrounding.
And Sarah?
My question only pertains to the public benefit piece. So my apologies, I'm going through my book here, but does anybody more quickly have the options that were available to the developer to provide public benefit at the different categories that the planner was just speaking to?
Public art, affordable housing, used to be LEED. I don't think it is anymore, but
yeah. So could we get some clarity on what the list is?
Yeah. Actually, Madam Chair, I would just have to pull that out the bylaw. But as I mentioned already, like public art is one, affordable housing is one. I don't have the list right in front of me, but.
So I don't think I can make a decision on that recommendation if I don't know the options. So.
Yeah, I have the list.
Okay.
Carl?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The first option is where a development involves a registered heritage property and it's going to be maintained or preserved. There is an option for provision of a publicly accessible amenity or open space. The provision of residential units as a subsidized cost to contribute to housing affordability in the downtown, which is proven difficult to actually apply, and maybe our legal services would have some opinions on that if we go down that road. Provision of 3 and 4 bedroom units with direct access to outdoor amenity space. Provision of rental commercial space made available at subsidized cost for arts or cultural use. Provision of public art. Provision of public parking facilities where a deficiency in such facility exists. Investment in public transit or active transportation infrastructure. The provision of exemplary sustainable building practices, or the undergrounding of overhead electrical and communication distribution systems as is proposed here.
Perfect. And was anything else discussed in terms of that list, or was that the only option that was proposed by the applicant?
That is the option proposed by the applicant.
Okay. And what would have been the financial? It's okay. I'll go back and read it just to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I think there was one more question from Christina before we move on to the applicant presentation.
Yes, thank you. My question would be about materiality, and that is related to sustainable practices. So I see lots of glass. Can you talk to us about that? And if there is any color, anything related to that glass? Anyway, talk to us about materiality and sustainable eco-efficient practices, because it's one of the things that you mentioned in your proposal. Please.
Madam Chair, I think the applicant would be the best one to speak in terms of why they chose the materials they did. The bylaw lists some materials that are prohibited in the downtown, and none of those materials are present in the proposal. So, but why they chose the materials they did is a question that I can't respond to, but the applicant likely can.
Okay. So Christina, if you're okay with that, we'll defer that question for after the applicant presentation, and then we can address that. Okay. So I believe I see David from Zeidler has joined us. Do we have Christina Lovett from WSP? There you are. Hi. So now that we've had the presentation from Paul, if I can turn it over to you both to do the applicant presentation. We do have a limit of 10 minutes. So just to be aware of that as you're pacing yourself through it.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, I'll begin with my 10-minute count. Thank you, committee chair, and thank you, Paul. My name is Christina Lovett, a senior planner with WSP. And with me is architect David Collins from Zeidler, and the architects are Zeidler and DSRA, and Danny Chedra from Mills Company Holdings. He's also with Westwood on the line for questions. Next. This is the overview of the site, but I'll skip that because Paul covered it. Next. This is some context of surrounding buildings, also covered by Paul, so I'll skip that as well. Next. So a few details of the proposal. The site is fairly large, around 47,000 square feet. The building is 8 stories. There will be 216 units, with 1/3 of those units being 2 bedrooms or greater. There will be ground floor commercial and retail space located on the street frontages, and a central pedestrian promenade, which provides a publicly accessible pathway mid-block through the site. Next. The building has a 5-story street wall base, and at the 6th level, the building steps back with tiered step backs on Spring Garden Road. There is particular attention paid to the urban realm and the pedestrian street experience at this busy corner and around the site. This is a view at the Spring Garden and Birmingham corner. Each of the building street elevations have the same level of attention to pattern, articulation, and material. There are a variety of ways used to break down and articulate the building, including introduction of a 3-dimensional sawtooth treatment, creating a lively and textured facade. Next. This is a shot from Spring Garden looking down Birmingham. Next. This view shows this Queen Street elevation. The mass and facades have been broken down into smaller elements by the use of various materials and protected and recessed balconies. At the corner of Spring Garden and Queen, the glass corner cube is cut back, providing extra space at the sidewalk level and providing a visual marker of this significant street corner. This cutback corner appears a couple more times around the site, indicating entrances to the promenade. Next. A view on Birmingham into the pedestrian promenade. The building opens to this space and allows natural light to come in. Interiorly, there are townhouses and restaurants and retail. This variety of uses helps to animate the space year-round and all times of day, contributing a sense of liveliness. At the end of the promenade, there is a view of the library. Next. This shows the Spring Garden retail storefronts. The glazed storefronts feature the same sawtooth expression found over much of the development, providing protected spaces at grade for pedestrians through the use of overhangs and visually guiding people towards prominent recessed retail entrances. Next. This is a nighttime view at the corner of Birmingham, looking out onto Spring Garden and showing the terraced balconies, which I'll discuss further when we cover the variances. Next. This shows the level 2 landscape open space to the north inside the pedestrian promenade. Intended as a private outdoor amenity space for residents and guests, this south-facing amenity will have a lot of sun and protection from prevailing winds. Next. View of the promenade, including the raised terrace for the proposed cafe space, the green spaces in front of the interior townhouses, and the space for the public to walk through, sit, and be. There will be spaces for raised planters, benches, bike parking, and a meandering river pattern to add interest and draw people to the space. The bottom of the screen shows an amenity space proposed for a doggy outdoor area for residents of the building as well. Next. This project is working closely with HRM Spring Garden Road streetscaping team. Items like the public benefit agreement to include undergrounding of a vault to accommodate Spring Garden Road's wires, and other things like other equipment related to that. And Danny Chedra can focus on that and explain more at the question period too. As well as the construction schedule and public space elements were also considered in coordination with Spring Garden Road. Next. We have submitted studies that look at traffic, shadow, and wind. For traffic, this development generates fewer trips than the previous land use on the site and is expected to have no significant impacts on performance of the streets. A shadow study was done, which looked at shadow coverage at different times of day and during different seasons. Well, the building is compliant with the Spring Garden Road angular plane, which is in place to minimize shadow on the street. It's also worth noting that there is optimal sunlight provided in the pedestrian promenade for midday to evening during most of the year. Wind studies were also completed and conditions were found to be acceptable. Next. So there's 5 variances. Next. The first variance is for the street wall width on Birmingham to allow for less of a street wall frontage than what is permitted. So we're asking for this, that we can provide the opening for the pedestrian promenade at an appropriate width. Next. So the LUB requires it to be 80%, and we've proposed a 77% street wall opening. Next. So variance 2 is for the interior lot line setback requirements for the shared property line to the south building, which is the Marianne. Next. So the LUB requires that the building portions above 18.5 meters in height be set back 5.5 meters from the adjacent property lines. So to not negatively impact the mechanical equipment of the adjacent building to the south, the Mills has set the bottom portion of the building further back than required. In order to accommodate the neighboring building, while also providing appropriate area for the pedestrian promenade towards the middle of the site, this lost square footage is being reallocated towards the middle and upper portions of the building's interior lot line. to allow for double loaded corridors. The setback varies because of the way the lot line is drawn, but our variance request asks from a range of a 4.2 meter to a 1.09 meter for the middle and upper portions of the building. And our rationale for this request is that the modification continues to provide the necessary floor area for this building, while accommodating the adjacent building at the ground floor, as well as providing sufficient space for the promenade. It's also important to note that this request does not negatively impact abutting land uses, as there is sufficient separation distance between this building and the one to the south, and there are no balconies on our south facade, mitigating possible impacts of this building's proximity. Next. So variance 3 is for increases of the street wall height on Queen Street and Birmingham Street. And as Paul explained, the land use bylaw does not allow the land use bylaw does allow for an 18.5 street wall on Queen and Birmingham, while Spring Garden Road allows for a 17-meter street wall. And because of clause 9.4 of the land use bylaw, which says when there is more than one street wall of differing heights, the lowest of the street walls shall be the permitted street wall height. And where Spring Garden Road is a max of 17 meters, Queen Street in Birmingham also would be expected to be 17 meters. Next. So our variance is asked for a minor increase of street wall heights on Queen and Birmingham to be above that 17 meters. However, this is still below the maximum height of what is permitted on those individual streets. And we're requesting a variance to have a 17.76 meter street wall on Queen and an 18.25 meter street wall on Birmingham Street. This variance is requested so that the mills can be consistent with the character of the street and match the other existing buildings located on both streets, which more reflect an 18.5 maximum street wall, such as the Marianne and the Margaretta building that is under construction. Next. So for variance 4, this is for the minimum street wall height on Birmingham Street for a portion of the street wall. The land use bylaw requires street walls to be a minimum of 11 meters. However, where the street wall abuts the pedestrian promenade, our lowest point is 17.5 meters. And the rationale for this is to allow for a modification of a corner piece of the street wall that joins the higher 18.25 meter street wall that's along Barrington and stepping down and then joining to the pedestrian promenade. And this lower street wall variance allows for a better transition to that amenity space, while also providing more sunlight into that central area of the site. Next. Yep, so this is just an image of it that Paul showed as well, which shows that stepping down and transition to the promenade. And lastly, variance next is a variance 5. So the final variance deals with the protrusion of the upper story balconies into the angular plane. So there is an angular plane on Spring Garden Road, and as Paul outlined, glass balcony rails can protrude into that, and that is something that the development officer reviews and looks at. So this variance is actually for the balcony depth and the length of the balconies, the aggregated length. So while the balconies are permitted to protrude into the setback, the variance is to ask for an increase in the depth and the horizontal width to be 100%. So as you can see, because of the angular plane, we're required to step our building back anyway. So there would be roof portions there nonetheless. Next. So while the land use bylaw requires the balcony protrusions to be no greater than 2 meters from the face of the building, we are requesting to have a 4.3 meter and a 3.9 meter depth on the 7th and 8th story, and the overall 100, filling it 100% with balconies. So as the angular plane already requires the face of the wall to be stepped back and terraced back, the space would simply be empty roof area if not used for balconies. Therefore, this is not increasing the mass of the building at all. It's simply better use of the space available. The terracing of the balconies provides more sunlight protrusion onto Spring Garden Road via the larger building face setback as required by the angular plane. And having the space used for balconies allows for more street-facing activation on the mid and upper floors of the building. This also provides a smooth horizontal design element that unifies the building's facade into a modern and cohesive design, rather than breaking up this with separate balconies by only complying with the 50%. So that is our presentation. Yeah, thank you very much. We are here for the questions you have asked. And again, we have Danny and David and myself here.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We'll go through the committee in order, and everyone can ask any questions, and then internally you can decide who is the best to respond to those questions as they come up, if that works. So first up is Charlotte. Any questions for you?
I have a quick question regarding the rooftop all the way at the top. So you've mentioned how the use of the balconies, pushing it forward or making them larger, uses more of the space for the people living there and everything. Is there any provision to also have outdoor landscaped areas on the very roof of the building?
I could take that. There is requirements to have like a percentage, an area of open space required for the building, and what is being provided does comply with that. So we have that the interior courtyard, upper level landscape area for the building residents to use.
I was just wondering if you had also added one at the very top, depending on how much space you had available up there, but that was just the question.
Yeah, right now we don't have like active residents going up to that very top roof.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else, Charlotte?
Nope, all good. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this may be something to add is the portions of the rooftop that that are not to be used for things like mechanical and that sort of thing do have to be landscaped. It's just that they don't have to be publicly accessible landscaped roof. But the rooftop, portions of the rooftop will actually be landscaped in terms of, you know, a mix of materials. It could be hard surface, but it, as Christina mentioned, it's not necessarily accessible landscape space. Thank you.
Okay. If I can, is there an option to, sorry, is there an option to potentially make it an extensive green roof on parts of that landscaping then, instead of having it as hardscaping?
The options there, and in fact, I believe it is proposed as a partial green roof. So maybe Christina can respond to that, but definitely the options there, yes.
Yeah, or maybe even David, if that's okay. I'm the regulation person. He's one that doesn't.
There's an option. We would look to make sure that it was maintainable and it didn't just die after a year, let's say. So we kind of we have mixed experiences with inaccessible rooftop green roofs across the country and whether or not that they're maintained. So unless we kind of really see a requirement for it in a particular jurisdiction, we don't necessarily recommend it all the time. So it's something that we could consider for sure.
Yeah, choosing the appropriate species for this climate can be really tricky. And I can understand the complications. It's just, it would be a very nice add to the building with the amount of green space you're offering. Not having it at the very top level would kind of be too bad, in my opinion. And seeing more green in the city is always a good addition, in my opinion. Thank you.
Fair.
Okay. Next on the list is Julian. Any questions for you?
Yes. I would like to go back to the underground wires, if I may. So I looked up in the internet, and there's a link that I can place on the chat for this project being carried on by the city. and there's an image there that shows that there's work being thought to be carried on exactly in front of this building that is being planned. I can probably, I don't know if I can put this link on the chat feature for all to see. And so it shows that exactly in that location of the project, there is foreseen that there will be work to, and it specifies that there will be undergrounding of all wires. And so if you go there and then there's an image there, if you scroll down in that link along in the website, and the image has another link, which I will put here. So my question is whether this red line that you see between Queen Street and Birmingham Street, which is where I believe that this project is located, is where the undergrounding of the wires that the developer proposes to compensate for the variances is going to happen.
If I can add a bit of detail, because though we were the ones that did the streetscape design, and the issue is trying to find the underground structures for, so what I'm hearing is that there's challenges in the street that are now being proposed to be placed in the building, which wouldn't otherwise go in the building. So in order to make the undergrounding work, the developer is proposing to resolve that challenge for HRM.
So does that mean that if the developer did not propose to carry on this work in compensation for the variances, this would not be possible?
The undergrounding could be compromised, yes.
Oh, I see. So that sort of changes a little bit the nature of the recommendation, in my opinion.
I think the other component is that with the undergrounding, if it wasn't completed by the developer, then it would be done by HRM, and it would be a cost to HRM. In this case, it's being, the cost is being absorbed as part of the project costs and is higher than, if I understand what Carl was explaining earlier, we haven't seen the calculation, but there is a calculation and a minimum dollar value that they have to hit. And generally speaking, it's quite a bit higher than that number typically is.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the presentation, for the answer. Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Annie, you have your hand up.
Yes, sorry. I was just going to suggest, Madam Chair, that while we have the applicants present, that during this portion of the discussion, if the questions could be directed specifically to the applicants, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next up is Marcel. Any questions, Marcel?
Yep. Just two quick questions. The first is the plans show that the promenade goes all the way through, but it looks like it's walled off in the rendering. I just want to confirm that promenade is clear through the whole way.
Christina, looks like, or David?
David.
Yeah, it's clear
goes through.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
There might be some lower level like site plan images in your package that will show the clear.
Yeah, so on the plan it showed it as clear through, but in the rendering it was kind of ambiguous. And then I'm curious about the blank facades on Spring Garden as you're walking towards the water. Like those indents, there's a really, like if you're walking down on the view from Birmingham, it looks like almost like a blank facade. I'm wondering if those could be replaced with glass, for example, so there's not these blank walls that you're walking by.
I'm not clear where you mean. You mean at grade?
Yep, at grade. If you look at the view from Birmingham, at grade, all you see is like the gray walls, the gray slabs sticking out. I don't know if those are structural, if that would be possible, but just from like a public public space point of view. I think it'll be nice to not have those
Sure.
4 walls in a row.
Sure. I
Trying
mean,
to clarify. Oh, sorry. I
sure.
was trying to clarify which location. Are you referring to by the loading area or?
No, on Spring Garden. So in the
Spring Garden.
rendering of the view from Spring Garden and Birmingham, as you're looking down Spring Garden, at grade, what you see is mostly just blank walls sticking out towards Spring Garden.
Didn't think there were any.
Like between the commercial units, like where the door comes in.
Christina's.
I can,
There,
so
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it was
Christina.
image 6 in our presentation. I don't know if we can go on, but
Maybe is
yeah.
it possible to bring that up so that we're all looking at the same thing?
Yeah, basically just the walls between the retail units at
storefronts.
grade on Spring Garden.
I'll leave that to David as well.
Sure. So, I mean, basically, those vertical, I guess, columns or pilasters serve a few different purposes. One of them is that they are hiding structure. That's kind of going from the floors above down to the parking garage. Another is they serve to kind of divide the facade at grade. So what we don't have is just a kind of a continuous glass facade like we see in some other buildings around the city, that it's kind of broken down into some smaller elements that are more related to the pedestrian experience there. Also, while I appreciate the rendering probably isn't doing them great service, I do expect that when the kind of owners of each of those commercial units would sort of take ownership over that, and we'd start to see signage and other things kind of bring those elements to life when you're walking down Spring Garden.
So David, essentially that's because of the sawtooth design. Is that why they result? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, like the walls would be there anyway, but they're exposed to the sidewalk because of the sawtooth glazing.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Nathan. Any questions?
No questions for me, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Rob.
Nope, no questions. Thanks for the presentation.
And Sarah?
None for me. Thank you.
And Christina, I know you had a question carry over from the last portion.
Yes, and other views, if you don't mind.
Of course, yes.
So my first question, and you are saying that you were very attentive to the context. Unfortunately, we didn't see any existing buildings in your renders. And this is a prime space in town. We have the library. Closed door. Can you tell us, and you mentioned that you were very sensitive to the urban context. Can you tell us what were the premises when you defined the design of the building, and how do you were attentive to Spring Garden Road, having, for example, into account that this building is going to be the highest on that side of the road, and this is going to provide the biggest shadow on the street from that side, which means that we're going to live in the shadow part of the day because of the building you're designing. And how does that comply with the library, which is a singular building in town? This is my first question.
Sure. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the library is set quite far back from Spring Garden, so it's not a great comparable. And maybe just as a simple answer to the question, we've complied with the sun shadow requirements established by HRM on Spring Garden. I don't think we're asking for a variance on those.
David, do you want to talk about like the materiality? Because like of the,
Sure.
there's lots of glazing around. The library itself is glazed, is glass.
Yeah, I mean, if we
and
look at the library, a lot of glazing. If we look at the Doyle across the street, we're seeing some precast and some glazing there. The address of the building just to the north of us isn't coming to my mind there right now, but again, we're seeing metal panel and a lot of glazing. So I think we are fitting in well with the buildings that are currently located on the four corners in this area.
Okay, so David,
Madam Chair.
Sorry. I don't know.
Before we move into the next question, hold on, Christina. Paul, did you have anything to add? And then we'll.
Sorry, just one thing to add. Back to the issue of shadows and building heights and things like that. Yeah, I mean, the rules are in place as a result of a lot of public consultation. And that happened obviously well over 10, 12 years ago. But the proposal does meet the rules that have been set. But one of the things I wanted to highlight with regards to the street walls are the 17-meter street wall in Spring Garden that now has to be met, in a scenario where there were no variances. That applies to both of the side streets, Queen and Birmingham. That's only because in this case, they've consolidated the entire lot. In the proposal is one building. If someone were not to do that and create other buildings, let's just say, for example, there's one building facing Spring Garden and additional buildings on separate properties along both of those side streets, those buildings could automatically have a street wall of 18.5 meters. So the rules are in place, and those street wall heights are in place, and the shadow renderings that have been provided as part of the staff report are really provided for your information. There are no specific rules with regards to shadowing other than the built form rules that we have. So the built form rules are meant to deal with issues like shadowing, and that's why you see the step backs above the street wall on Spring Garden. That's the exact reason. It's to allow sunlight penetration. So I just wanted to kind of clarify the intent behind these rules to begin with. So
thank you.
I think that is pretty clear. The only thing is, as we citizens, are we gonna like to live in the future with the Spring Gardens with no sun? Because that's what the regulation is doing for us. That's all my comment. And I'm an architect, so I would like us to focus on that. Is the kind of city we are building. And of course, this is not just the specific design, it's actually the rules that we are implementing, okay? So my next question is about the materials. And of course, David, to use an argument that the library is glass and you have plenty of glass around is obviously an argument as any other. But my point of view here is that the amount of glass that you are providing in a building, which is mainly about privacy. And if you imagine that I'm at the library at the second floor and I can see a person dwelling in front of me with all that glass in any floor at all, I would imagine what is to be about privacy and dwelling there. So I think glass could be very nice, but even in your image at night, privacy is gone. So glass is possible in a library, even though it's too much, and these sustainable issues that we have today. We have to think about the amount of glass we're putting in our buildings, because that's not sustainable. That's why my next question relates to materials, but is more about what is the sustainable thing. And you are doing low income housing, I believe, and you are putting all that amount of glass. No, but glass, sorry, maybe I did not use the right term, but is, well, anyway.
I don't believe there's low income housing here in this development. We are just about out of time for your question, Christina. So if you want to.
My question is, how is it sustainable, and how do you provide privacy in a building which is downtown with a library that everybody can see to the interior of the flats?
Sure. I mean, I can take this. Maybe I'll take the second question first. I think privacy issues remain with the resident. It's fully within their control through things like blinds, especially at night. And that would be the same in any building across any city, whether there was a library across the street or not. I can say that the buildings are set far enough apart that it's not it's not a particular concern in this case. During the day, and this ties into your sustainability question, the kind of glass that we would typically use on buildings like this, just because of the low E coatings that are applied, as I'm sure you're aware, the glass tends to be a little bit reflective and a little bit tinted, and unless kind of looked at in a particular way, in a particular kind of light, are actually somewhat opaque. So I think when we talk about privacy during the day, again, I'm not sure I see the issue. Sustainability wise, when we look at picking materials in any building, anywhere, we're looking at this stage primarily at durability, accessibility, maintenance. We want to make sure that we're kind of working with high quality partners. In this case, we are both with our precast and our window wall and glazing fabricators. We're looking at kind of high quality products for everything. And to me, what this means is that they're going to be thermally high performance and that they're going to last a long time. And this is how kind of we approach sustainability, especially kind of in the absence of kind of an overriding green standard, let's say that Halifax might have. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the end of our questions. So if we could get the motion posted in the chat, and then I will call for, what am I supposed to be doing here? Put forth the staff recommendation on the floor, and we'll call for a motion to be moved and seconded so that it can be debated. And sorry, but I do need whoever does it to read everything that's in the chat. Do we have a mover?
I'll move.
Thank you, Charlotte.
So I guess I moved that the Design Review Committee approve the qualitative elements of the substantive site plan approval application for an 8-story mixed-use building on lands at 1470 Queen Street, Halifax, PID 3077461, as shown in attachment A, that the committee approve the variances to the land use bylaw requirements regarding minimum street wall width, internal property line setbacks above the street wall, maximum and minimum street wall heights, and upper story street wall setbacks as contained in attachment B. That the committee accept the findings of the quantitative wind impact assessment as contained in attachment C, and that the committee recommend that the development officer accept the undergrounding of electrical and communication distribution systems, underground vault for utilities, as the post-bonus public benefit category.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have a seconder for that?
I second that, Nathan.
Great, thank you, Nathan. Okay, so Charlotte has moved, Nathan has seconded. We can now discuss the staff recommendation, and each person has up to 5 minutes. I'll go through the list again just to keep track of everyone. So first up, because Jess is not able to participate, Julian.
Oh, I'm good. Thanks.
Good. Nathan, anything? Comments, questions?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering about a bit of procedure here, I guess, as they're presented, if we have any discussions on any of the variances individually, is there a process to, I guess the discussion, are any of these going to be broken out perhaps and approved or not approved separately, I guess, from a procedural standpoint?
It's a good point. The motion is presented as 4, but maybe Annie, you can clarify. Can we go through and do them individually to see if there are any issues within the group on a particular point versus another?
Thank you, Chair. So my suggestion on this, where the motion is crafted as having all of the variances approved together, if there is a desire for any of the committee for any member of the committee to split those up, that is certainly within their ability to do. But I would. Actually, maybe I might defer to legal on this piece. I would assume that we would need to do that motion individually if there is the desire to not approve any of the variances listed there as it pertains to the guideline.
Hello. If there are specific variances or other parts of the recommendation that you wanted to discuss, you could discuss those separately. Whichever member of the committee could raise the issue that they wanted to raise. And then if there's a desire on the part of the committee to break things out and vote separately on them, then that's a possibility.
So I guess, are we permitted, as a starting point, as part of the discussion, maybe by a show of hands, if people are in agreement with, we can go through 1, 2, 3, and 4 just to see if there are any areas of contention, or is that just trying to break it out into manageable parts? I think is what you mean, Nathan, right?
Yeah, I didn't intend to open up a can of worms, but more or less, like I guess we're talking about a number of different issues, and I didn't know if maybe there was some that everyone was in favor for, but if there was 1 or 2 stragglers that needed further discussion, then that was sort of wondering about the process to do that. I guess.
I think. Oh, Annie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would potentially suggest that the committee members discuss the motion as it stands now, and if there are particular issues that committee members have with the variances, they can bring this up in this initial discussion. And as the discussion progresses, if there's a desire to move them out separately, then that can be done through an amendment, and we can draft that should that be required.
Okay. Okay, so that being said, Nathan, any particular of the topics that you have a concern with?
No, none for me, thank you.
Okay. Sorry, did I skip Marcel? Did I skip you? I didn't mean to.
Nothing right now, thanks.
Okay. Rob, anything for you?
No, I think, generally speaking, this is a large site. There's grade changes on it. All of the 5 variances seem to be in keeping with the design manual and generally in agreement with staff's position on them.
Okay, thank you very much. Sarah, how about you?
So I guess I just want this to be reflected in the minutes if it's possible. I'm going to vote for the motion, although I'm having difficulty with number 4, just the recommendation of the underground electrical communication. I'm very understanding that we're moving forward towards some other public benefits and opportunities for us to support our communities, but it's just as a human being, it's tough to vote for that as the public benefit with the current housing crisis in our city and how we've created it through old bylaws like this. So I guess I just want that noted. I completely understand, given this circumstance, that this might be the best choice for this build, but it's just weighing on me that we're not allocating funds to affordable housing, and I know that will be an option in package B and the other portions of the center plan, and I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, if that could be noted somewhere, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you. Christina, any comments?
Yes, I have a few recommendations. Do not allow the maximum of 17 meters on Spring Garden Road in order to minimize the shadow on public space. Second, to qualify the south building setback and do not allow a minimum of 1 meter, 0.09. I think it's more than just a measurement. It's more about what is that space about, because it's just a passage at this point. So it's not a qualified space. Number 3, to avoid the amount of glass on the facade because of the sustainable issues of the building and also privacy issues. Yeah, for me is this. Oh, and there is another thing, which is regarding the, no, I'll leave it like this. I would be happy if this is going to be considered.
Okay, so another point of order, sorry. I just want to be, the glass and the materiality, I guess, sort of relates to point number 1 of the motion, the qualitative elements, but there are no specific variances requested regarding the materials that have been proposed. So there's...
Can we ask for variance? No?
Well, they've met, it's not a variance because they've met, that they're not proposing any materials that are not permitted. The materials that they've proposed are permitted, so they don't require the variance. We can make recommendations.
Is the percentage, I would say the percentage of glass is the problem to me.
Then it's a bylaw issue and it needs to be a bylaw, so it has nothing we can weigh in on.
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry.
I don't think it's necessary because it's within the regulations of the land use bylaw. I don't believe that we have the
can't override
authority to override it. We can make comments and recommendations. And Carl, I see you've turned on your camera, so I'm sure you're just ready to jump in here.
Okay, but but what if you relate that with the issues of sustainability? Can you? I'm just asking because I think it's too much going on in terms of glass.
Carl, yeah, go for it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think that there is, there are 2 separate things that the committee is being asked to approve: the qualitative elements and then the more quantitative elements, at least as they relate to the variances. So not hearing anything, or at least to this point, about the variances, we'll put that aside for the moment. I think the committee has a fair bit of latitude when talking about the qualitative elements of the design manual. Now, Rob is right on the money where when we're talking about street wall height and we're talking about, percentages of glazing and where glazing is located, our take and Paul, the staff take is that the plan and the design manual, and specifically the design manual where this is the document that the committee is applying, they're actually encouraging these things. So there's 2 different approaches you could take. The committee could say, well, we generally just don't think, notwithstanding, we just don't think that this proposal meets the qualitative, sort of the essence of the design manual, and therefore that first, motion fails. And the other option is to move that, we think that there's a problem with the rules themselves, either something, the numbers in the bylaw, be that the street walls are too high or the percentage of glazing, or the design manual. Now, that being said, both of those documents are sort of on the precipice of change, where package B is coming and the committee was presented to on those. So it's a bit of an odd situation, but that's what I see the options are right now. Either, indicating that it would failing on the qualitative elements as compared against the design element. And then it would probably be in the committee's best interest to identify the specific elements that were the cause for that recommendation, where it's likely that this would be, or it's possible anyways, that this would be appealed. And the second one is to make that motion, but again, changes afoot in the near future. Maybe that helps.
I guess. What is your idea? What do you think as a committee?
Well, I guess we have one more I guess Charlotte is the last person to
Let's
speak,
wait
and then
then.
we can,
Yeah, debate that, absolutely.
if that works. So
Yeah.
Charlotte, any not to put you on the spot here, but any comments?
No comments. I think the design compared to like the existing buildings on that lot area is actually does match the area. And just as a quick comment regarding Christina's point of view, privacy can be a concern, but in my opinion, blinds work. And if you really need a lot of privacy and require, you know, your own secluded area, you don't live downtown.
Oh my God, Charlotte, this is
it's-
a building that
no,
will
I
last
know. It's
generations. Don't do that.
just a quick thing that just made me smile.
Okay, so I think, Christina, it sounds like you have the majority of the concerns of the group related to the materiality, privacy, and the wall height, I believe, were the three.
The building height.
The overall building height or the street wall height?
The street. I mean, I would say regarding Spring Garden is the 70 meters high, which is what is allowed maximum. It should not go beyond that. They requiring a little bit more, and I would say stay on the limit. That's my recommendation. If 17 is the limit, I would stay with the limit. And this is the I think this is the first building with 17 meters on that side of the street facing Spring Garden.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think if I can jump in real quick, I think the reason they are raising the limit a tiny bit on one corner is because the street is sloped slightly. So it creates this slightly higher corner. But that allows for a straight top of the building, so that at the top, when you're looking at the building from other areas, you don't have kind of a, you know, set down or something.
Annie, you had a...
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm just wondering if perhaps Paul could could reiterate the rationale behind the height there. I think that would probably be useful.
Madam Chair, the 17 meters on Spring Garden is not in question. They meet that. The variance on Spring Garden they're asking for is above the street wall related to the balconies. And they're proposing glass balconies, which our staff have said is fine. It's that the balconies stretch the entire length. And the depth of the balconies, when you think about that's a relatively minor in the sense that the 2 meter requirement for balconies is more if you envision a straight building wall with regular balconies, it was to allow a 2 meter balcony. But these this is different. That's different. The height variances are really on the two side streets, and they're minor. And like I indicated, if they subdivided the site and built separate buildings on those side streets, they would automatically meet they would be automatically entitled to 18.5 meters. So that's part of the staff recommendation, or the rationale behind it, is that really what the building you end up with is really no different than what could be permitted in other ways, just kind of splitting up the site.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank
That is clear. Okay.
Thank you.
And it's okay with me.
You're okay with that, Christina?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So are there, before we go to a vote, then are there any other follow-up questions from
the
group?
Is the south building setback of the minimum of 1.09 meters? What is that space be about? Because the minimum supposed to be, if I remember, is supposed to be 4.2 but now they requesting 1.9. Is that correct?
I believe it's one, and Paul can probably respond better to this. It's 1.9 at a very particular point because the property line jogs.
Right. Yeah. So in that case, the south property line, I guess the best way to explain it is the street wall portion of the building, the low-rise portion of the building, can be built right up to the property line. As long as they meet building code, they can be built right up to the property line. And the portion above the street wall, above the, in this case, it would be around 18.2 meters. That portion should be, the rules say that portion should be set back 5.5 meters. So what they've proposed is to have a setback, not to build right up to the property line, but to have a setback at the low portion, but also have a reduced setback on the mid-rise portion. And so the variance document, the design rationale document, I think it's attachment B of the report, that goes into the details of that, of why they've requested that. And they looked at two options and they chose option 2 or option B, which is this one. They've indicated in that they've talked to the property owner. And if you want to get more information on that, that's all I can tell you. So you may have to ask the applicant, but the attachment does go into details about why they asked for that specific variance.
Yeah, I thank you, Paul. But my concern is that is not going to be a qualified space, and this is a prime space in the city. So I'm just concerned, what is that space going to be in the future? That's all.
Okay, that's a good point. Julian, I see you've got your hand up. Did you have a separate question or something, a comment to add?
Yeah, related to what Nathan said about his question about all 4 aspects of this motion going together in one vote. I would like to, I think it's a good idea to separate at least number 4 and about number 1, maybe list which are the qualitative elements that refers to. Now, going into, if we agree to separate number 4 into a separate motion related to that, my final question about that issue would be, what would be the alternative if they did not propose to do this? I mean, what would have been the option for them if they don't propose to put underground electrical? So that would be my final remark and question about this motion.
Madam Chair, so sorry, just so I understand, is the question that if the committee does not make that recommendation, is that the question?
No, what I'm saying is that I think it's a good idea to separate number 4 as a separate motion, just an opinion and a proposal, a suggestion. And the other one would be just to list within the motion which are the qualitative elements that number 1 refers to. The one that the remark related to number 4 being a separate motion would be, what would be the option for the developer if they had not proposed to the undergrounding of the wires? Like, what would have been the normal, and if they did not propose this as a compensation to the variances?
So the other options that would be available to them were the list that Carl had read out from the bylaw.
No.
It is unknown, I believe, if they considered other options that wasn't presented as part of the presentation information or the package.
No, that's not what I meant, and excuse me if I don't explain myself well. So my opinion, my question or my remark is, it's separate in two parts, right? One, that number 4 would be left out as a different motion.
Okay.
And we still have the motion for number 1, 2, and 3. Now, with that, if that's motion number 1, which includes number 1, 2, and 3, then just to provide a simple list of what are the qualitative elements that number 1 refers to in that list. And if the second motion is going to be considered separately, which is the one that deals with the undergrounding of the electrical and communication distribution systems, what would have been the normal procedure for the developer? Because they are proposing to do this in compensation for the variances, the way I understand this. Now,
no.
Okay, then I need more clarification of this, because they are we are accepting that they propose this in exchange for what? What is
for bonusing? Sorry, and I'm sure Carl can speak to this, and I see Annie's got her name up, but my understanding is this is in compensation for additional floor area as part of the bonusing structure. Higher, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a variance, right?
No.
No?
No,
So
they're separate. I'm sure there's separate issues. The variances relate back to the design manual, and if the design manual provides kind of like the rules that the committee should consider for granting the variances. That's totally separate from the number 4, which is the public benefit category. So the public, again, the public benefit category is a proposal by the developer. The committee can either choose to recommend in favor of that or not. Ultimately, it's a decision of regional council which category is chosen. Okay, but that's unrelated to variances.
Okay.
Annie, you had.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if you had mentioned that Carl had his hand up, but if Carl had his hand up and would like to speak, he can go first, and then I can follow with the procedural piece that we're working through here.
You're good. I think Carl was willing to jump in, but Paul got it first, so we're good.
Okay, wonderful. So in terms of splitting the motion, having 1, 2, and 3 split from 4, that can absolutely be done. As Paul has just outlined, that they are kind of 2 separate pieces around jurisdiction between the design manual and the recommendation to the development officer through council. So if there is a desire to have recommendation 4 split from 1, 2, and 3, that can certainly be done. And I'm not sure if the answer that Paul had just provided answered the questions to the first recommendation. But if I believe we have heard an ask to split the vote. So if that is the direction that the mover would like to go in, we can certainly proceed with splitting the vote between recommendations 1, 2, and 3 from 4.
I guess, Julian, based on the explanation that Paul has given, do you still want to request that?
Well, I'm satisfied with the explanation that Paul provided, but I still would like to request that the motion be separated in 2 different motions.
Okay. That clause, item number 4 of the original motion be separated into a second motion?
Yes, that would be my proposal. Yes, my suggestion, my requirement.
Okay. So in terms of doing that, we need a motion and a seconder.
I'll motion it.
I believe. I'm just catching up with Annie here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we could potentially take a 2-minute break so that I can confer with legal, that would be wonderful. Yes, if you're comfortable with that, Madam Chair, perhaps taking a 2-minute break here.
Before we do that, the chances of us wrapping this up in 15 minutes are low, would be my guess. Is everyone comfortable if we extend by, I don't know, another 15 minutes beyond that to 6:45, and just to give us that time? In which case we do need a motion to extend by an additional 15 minutes.
Unfortunately, I can't. I have to leave by 6:30. And so rather than the 2 minutes, I'd like to have some discussion about maybe while HRM's conferring on this, about the public benefits and how these typically work with developers. And it's very challenging at this point to go back and imagine what a new public benefit might be. So if we could have that discussion now.
I think we can try. I'm not sure. Annie was shaking her head, but then she's disappeared. So
legal needs to be present in order for.
Oh, so they can't be in two places.
Yes, that's kind of the issue that we're going on. So I guess I don't believe that we actually need a motion put forward regarding splitting the vote. So, or we don't need a seconder. It is not debatable. So if the vote, there's been a request for the vote to be split into 2 different sections. So my understanding now would be that we would be moving into debate between the 2 different motions on their own, dealing with the first one, recommendations 1, 2, and 3. And then once that has been voted upon, then moving into discussion and debate regarding
number 4.
Yes.
Okay. So looking at items 1, 2, and 3, which relate to the qualitative elements, the variances, and the wind impact assessment, are there any further comments or debate points on those 3? Seeing none. Is it possible to I'll call question for all those in favor to approve items 1, 2, and 3 in the chat for the qualitative elements, the variances, and the wind impact assessment. If you are in favor, say aye, and contrary, say nay.
Aye.
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 Abstention.
Okay. Did I do that right, Annie?
Sorry, Madam Chair. So just confirming, do we have a mover and a seconder on the first 3? I think we kind of maybe we went straight into the vote.
Oh, sorry. We had a mover and yeah. Okay. We had a mover and seconder on all 4.
Okay, so they were already on the floor. Wonderful, great. So the mover and seconder were already put forward. Great. Okay, no, we're good.
We're okay.
I'm playing catch up as we're going along, but no, we're good. And the vote has stood for the first portion.
The first 3. Yes. So then, okay, so then that takes care of those 3. So then the remaining is the recommendation to accept the undergrounding of the electrical for the post-bonus public benefit category. So we can put that one on the floor again, if there are any comments or debate. And then amongst the group, I'll open it up.
So maybe I could just start by saying that in Nova Scotia, the cost of undergrounding is somewhere between 10 and 15 times overhead power lines. And while I think we can all agree that it would be wonderful to underground, and it should be in place in a lot of cities. The costs are such that we only see small lengths of Argyle Street, and this plan, of course, for Spring Garden Road is a $10 million plan, and a big chunk of the money is undergrounding. And to the extent that developers can provide either cash to do that themselves or provide room in their facilities for the undergrounding equipment, I think the outcome is still a great outcome. The more we can get power lines off the street, the better we are. And I'll just leave it at that. I also just wanted to say, these discussions happen very early in a design process because you have to accommodate whether it's public art or affordable housing. It's really tough to go back and to change things at a very late date. And I'm very comfortable with this recommendation for public benefit.
One thing we have seen in previous applications, and Paul or Carl, you may be able to speak to that, is the calculation. So we've seen the request for the additional bonus area and what that translates to in terms of a minimum cost. And then we've also seen an estimate of what the cost is for, and it's typically the undergrounding of the utilities. I think this question was asked early on, but has that been completed? Do we have a sense of where those numbers sit?
Madam Chair, the numbers, as Carl mentioned, currently the numbers are relatively low in terms of the amount that the benefit comes to, and that's proposed to change with center plan. At the moment, the applicant hasn't provided the specific numbers, but it's based on the floor area. And as indicated, it's typically a relatively low number. And in a lot of cases, developers will exceed that amount in the actual benefit they provide. And we've had situations where, it's tenfold the amount. So the numbers haven't been provided. I'm sure they easily could provide them, but it's kind of irrelevant at this point because the category we're more concerned about. The committee just basically makes a recommendation on the category, not the number. Okay.
No, it's something we've seen in past applications. I realize they haven't provided it, but it may have helped provide some clarity. That's all. Okay. Any other comments or questions about this particular point of the motion? Sarah? Oh, you're muted, Sarah.
Clicked it, but it didn't click. So I think just to further the point that I was making earlier, it can be pretty frustrating when we're having a conversation, basically to Rob's point, saying that it's really hard to change the thing that we're deciding on today. So then why would it even be put in front of us as a group to decide on, is kind of my question. And it's just kind of a bizarre situation where if the argument is that it would be difficult to change, then why are we voting on it in the first place? And why would we make a recommendation to council one way or another in the first place? So I really struggle with comments like that because it makes me feel like I've just wasted 2 hours of my time. And I just think that generally speaking, we should have the full amount of information. I think staff do a great job, but the whole point of committees like this are to review the information and agree or disagree or put forward motions or not. And if we don't have that information, then we're left to just trust staff, and that defeats the purpose of even having the committee in my mind. So I guess I'll just make those comments about those two pieces. If anybody else has any thoughts about it. Thanks.
Okay. Last call. Any other comments?
I think Sarah has a point, and I think as citizens, we have a voice.
Oh, you just muted yourself, Christina.
And I hope that what we're doing here is for the public's sake. So in a way, what I would like to say, yes, there are regulations, but at least some recommendations should be done in order for us to have a better city. And that's all we want. And so I agree with Sarah. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
I want to, if I may, I want to second what's being said so far. Like, it's frustrating to, prepare for this meeting and sit through 2 hours and just be like, okay, the footings are in the ground already. Like, why are we here? I do agree that it would be really nice if we could do some amount of recommendations, and either that, I understand our hands are tied here, but maybe that's in the form of a letter to council or something to that effect, to try and make our voices heard at council, who can actually, shape the future of the city going forward.
Rob, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't think our hands are tied. If somebody feels strongly that affordable housing should be the public benefit, then now's the time to say that. And I didn't mean to suggest that we don't have a say in that. I just happen to agree that, having worked on the street for a long, long time, that undergrounding it is a tremendous public benefit. And but you guys have the option to say otherwise, and eventually it will go to council.
Sarah, and then Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, I actually do think our hands are tied because of the way that the land use bylaw is prescriptive now. If it was the land use bylaw that's being put forward around center plan, then that would be another conversation. But the one in the downtown core right now, the way that it's written is that essentially the private sector, the developer, would own the affordable housing. And I think that, we've already made mention of legal, but generally speaking, that's not best practice in housing in general, or affordable housing, or accessible housing for that matter. So I think that our hands are tied. I think we do have to move forward with this motion, but it's frustrating. And generally speaking, if the recommendations around the public benefit if those conversations are being had at this juncture, and then we go through this whole process, and this is where we decide that perhaps that wasn't the best use, then that's not doing anyone any favors. So that's a bit frustrating as well. And I think that that's what Marcel was trying to express as well. But
okay, Charlotte, you're next, and then Julia.
Thank you. I agree completely with both points of view, which is kind of tricky. So I completely agree with Sarah with the fact that, like, a lot of people are really struggling with affordable housing, and the affordable housing options that are mostly put forward nowadays are not affordable. But then also I completely see Rob's point of view, where putting all of those amenities underground will prevent a lot of power outages, which are a huge issue as well nowadays. What I was thinking could maybe put in as a comment is, why not use some of the commercial spaces to be more geared towards community, instead of being rented space for profit or something. Have at least some of those units that would be, or at least one of them, that could be turned into something towards helping the community and providing something instead of just something people can buy, or a restaurant or something. And it would, as I'm trying to find the words, but it's getting tricky. I'm sorry. I don't know if anybody understands what I mean.
No, I think, and that was one of the options noted in the land use, that some of the retail space could be made available to not-for-profit organizations, or
I think if that was like a requirement and not just like it could be used, that might help a little bit alleviate this problem that we have where, well, we would like to help the community more, but then it's also public benefit to put the wires underground.
Julian? Just because I'm trying to.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I agree with Sarah, and this sort of is aligned with the discussion we had in our last meeting, where there was a correspondence, a very knowledgeable person that pointed out that if the new plan goes ahead, then the design review committee would disappear. So this is aligned somewhat with that discussion, what we're discussing today. And also, I agree with Rob about the cost, the elevated cost of undergrounding utilities. However, my specific point about this recommendation, and now I'm more aware and clear about the public benefit nature of this, which is not in exchange of variances. However, my point is, if this is going to happen anyway in Spring Garden Road, the undergrounding, what would have been the alternative for the developer if they didn't offer as a public benefit issue to underground the wires, because it would have been done anyway? Would they have put wires in front of their buildings, overhead wires? I don't think so. So that's my remark about this. I agree with Sarah, and this goes hand in hand with the discussion we had in our last meeting. And my specific remark about this recommendation, now that I'm aware that this public benefit, is what would they have done different if they didn't offer as a public benefit issue to underground the wires if it's being done anyway? Like, if anyone comes in the future, 5 years, and they're going to demolish one block of Spring Garden Road, would they have the option to say, okay, I'm going to put underground wires, because they would have done it anyway, instead of, oh, they have to put some expensive street art there. That's my point here.
Rob, I think, do you have your hand still up or up again? You're good. Carl has his hand up.
All right.
You're good. Okay. Thank you.
Well, to respond to the question that I think was just asked, so the bylaw right now says that development pursuant to subsection 1 shall be permitted where the developer provides one or a combination of the following benefits. So there's no criteria that is provided to say this is more valuable than that, or in this condition we need that. That's why some of the rules are changing. That's why the list is shrinking to condense it to something, only the things that we really want. In this particular case, I believe that the municipality came and approached the applicants, the developers, to say, we're in a hard spot here. Can you accommodate us on their site? And they were able to. So I don't know, once that happened, and it happened at the right time in the process, I think that the other options were sort of put aside because this was the one that was sort of top of the pile, that we were approaching them as an organization, as a municipality, saying, can we do this? But if they did get to those other options, it's a permissive list in and of that. Provide one of these, and ultimately council's going to have to sign the agreement. But that's what the bylaw currently says, and part of the reason why changes happen.
Thank you. So not to get off topic, but it is at 6:31. We got distracted, and I know that's what Annie's coming up to remind me of. We did get distracted, and we did not extend the meeting. So how is everybody ready to vote, or do we need to extend the meeting by 10 or 15 minutes as we had originally talked about?
I would prefer to vote because I have to leave.
Okay. Okay, so in that case, let's put the motion. We've got the motion on the floor from the original motion for item number 4, which is to accept the undergrounding of electrical and communication distribution systems as the post-bonus public benefit category. I'll ask everybody to vote. Those in favor say aye, and those who are contrary say nay.
Aye.
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 I would like to abstain.
Okay. So based on that, the vote passes. And just, sorry, going through, making sure I've hit everything. So we had no other, so that's all 4 of the motions have passed. We have no preliminary presentations. We have no committee members added items in camera. The date of our next meeting is scheduled for October 14th, 2021. Welcome back, Jess. So as a last point, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, there you go. I'll second.
Okay, and so the meeting is adjourned at 6:33. Thank you very much, everyone. Good conversation tonight, and
Thank you all.
appreciate your time and effort.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
You want to chair?
Bye, all.